Welcome back to Dear Dog Fanatic. I'm your host, Kay. I am a dog mom of 3, and I run a virtual dog training practice under the handle The Canine Detective. So today we're doing something a little bit different and super exciting. We actually have some listener write-ins. So rather than reacting to Reddit stories, I'm going to be giving some expert dog advice to some of the listeners. And if I answer your question today, but maybe you have some follow-up questions for me, feel free and DM me on Instagram at the Canine Detective, and we will get you sorted out. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into the first question. And this one is more common than you might think, but it's a little bit gross. So content warning that we will be talking about dog poop for the first question. Feel free and skip ahead to question number 2 if that is not your vibe right now. Maybe you're eating. But yes, this next question and my advice will be about how to stop dogs from eating poop. So this was actually submitted by a follower over on Instagram, and they ask, is there any holistic approach to dealing with coprophagia? Bull terrier eats poop emoji. So for those of you who don't know, coprophagia is the technical term for the ingestion of feces, aka poop. This is super common in a lot of dogs, so don't freak out, listener. What's going on and what a holistic approach will look like for your dog, I'll get into here in a little bit. But first, I'm going to preface this by saying that dogs ingest feces for a number of different reasons. And sometimes dogs will ingest some sort of feces, but not others. And we'll get into that reasoning in a little bit here. How we approach stopping your dog from eating poop will also depend on what kind of poop they're eating. Are they eating their own poop? And are they doing that exclusively, meaning that, they don't eat other dogs' poop or the poop of other animals, but only their own? Do they not eat their own poop, but they'll eat other dogs' poop? Will they eat cat poop, but not dog poop? Will they not touch that, but maybe you're out hiking in the forest and they'll eat deer poop? Why is Kay listing off all these different kinds of poop that my dog can be eating? What does this matter? Well, there are reasons why dogs eat poop, and so our approach, both in terms of management techniques and a behavior modification plan, it will depend on the reason why. Because if we just keep treating the symptoms, we might not be solving an underlying problem. So why do dogs eat poop? Sometimes this is related to scavenging. Sometimes this is due to boredom. Sometimes it's nutritional deficiencies, aka there's something missing from their usual diet, so they're trying to find those nutrients elsewhere. Or sometimes this can even be related to behavioral issues like anxiety. So while management might be the same, how we change that behavior sustainably, aka like over the long term, will depend on the why behind the behavior. So my first recommendation, if you haven't done so already, would be to take your dog to the vet and explain that they're eating poop. Provide them with the context of what kind of poop are they eating, in what situations, when, because then the vet might have some different ideas for you as well, particularly if this is related to a nutrient deficiency, right? So already I'm saving you money, not needing to hire a dog trainer potentially, because if this is simply related to a lack of certain vitamins or minerals or what have you, something is missing from their diet, then introducing that thing into their diet with the help of a vet who is certified or has a background in nutrition should be able to solve most of the problem. Now, this could have become a habit. So in the case where you have corrected your dog's diet and they're still doing it, the why under the why, we may conclude that perhaps this wasn't A, the only reason why they were doing it, or B, this is just a leftover habit. It's similar with dogs and humans. This is all related to behavior change. When we do things often enough, we create a neurological superhighway in our brain where, you've been going down this path over and over. It's a well-worn, well-trodden path. They're just used to doing it. This is where management is going to come into place. We're going to get them into a new habit of not eating the poop. But why this will actually work is because we have fixed the why. We have fixed the problem of them not having enough nutrients in their diet, which means that when we employ these management techniques to prevent them from eating poop, we'll actually be able to create a new behavior for them, aka not eating poop. However, if we just jumped straight in and only did management but didn't solve the why, then your dog would still be having this nutrient deficiency, which means that our training might not be successful and that they're still eating poop, or they are going to compensate and come up with a new way of trying to address that need. And oftentimes that won't be in a way that you're wanting, and your dog is not going to be as healthy as they could be because they're still missing that thing from their diet. So that's one avenue of why your dog might be eating poop. And I love that this listener asked for a holistic approach. So while this might sound pedantic of why I'm going down this possible avenue or that possible avenue, it's because there's a lot of reasons why this could happen. And we need a holistic approach. We need to look at the whole system and wonder, is this diet related? Is this otherwise health related? Is this something to do with their biological needs? Does this have to do with anxiety or boredom? When we come up with the answer, then we'll be able to employ the right technique to fix it. In the case of this being a scavenging instinct, there's a few different ways to address this. Dogs are scavengers. Some dog breeds were bred to also hunt. And so oftentimes people will get confused because they'll think, oh, dogs are like wolves. They're meant to, hunt for their prey. This can be the case, particularly with some wild dog species that there are out there, but the domesticated dog, for the most part, aren't hunters. They were scavengers. That is how we domesticated them in the first place. We have bred certain breeds to hunt alongside humans, but what that predatory sequence looks like and what those behaviors look like with the particular dog breeds is different than that if you compared them to, say, a wolf or a wild dog. So why is this important? Dogs are scavengers. So the scavenging behavior is they are meant to look for leftovers out in the wild of things to eat where they can. The scavenging behaviors are different from the hunting behaviors. To put it in really simple terms, what does this have anything to do with eating poop? Well, if a dog is, again, back to maybe missing something in their diet, maybe poop tastes tasty for them. Some dogs say won't eat their own poop, but deer poop is delicious to them for whatever reason. So when they see the poop out on the trail, they're like, that looks like a delicious snack. Let me just go and scavenge, grab that. So how would you address the poop eating behavior if it's in that case? This is where we're going to bring into the management aspect of it. So the first step to any sort of behavior change just being that anything that a dog is doing, eating something, jumping up on something they're not supposed to, pulling, barking, whatever, these are all behaviors, right? It's not a thought. It's something that the dog is doing. Behavior change just means, we don't like what they're doing. We want them to do something else. In this case, this is the dog eating poop. We don't want the dog to eat poop. Very understandable. The first step in having your dog not eat poop is for them to not practice eating poop. Well, thank you very much, Kay, for stating the obvious. What would you do without listening to this podcast? This all goes back to the idea that to create a new habit, you need to stop doing the existing habit. So how do we get the dog to stop eating poop? These can be using techniques like a muzzle, making it physically impossible for the dog to ingest the poop. This could be things like having a really good leave it cue. This could be things like not putting your dog in situations where they commonly eat the poop. The third one, I'll give you some examples so you can see how this works in practice. If your dog is constantly eating deer poop out on trails, or goose poop is another common one here in Canada, while you're training this, take a couple weeks break from walking them in goose poop ridden areas if possible. Just stop practicing the poop eating behavior while we teach them the skills to not eat the poop. This could also look like, does your dog really like cat poop? And you have a cat. Let's ensure that the dog doesn't have access to the cat's litter box, so that way they're not going to be practicing eating the cat poop. This could be things like your dog eating their own poop, or say you have multiple dogs eating another dog poop. Every time your dog goes potty in the yard, you're out there and you're scooping up the poop. You're not leaving your dog unsupervised out with the poop, so that way they're not practicing eating poop while your back is turned. These are just a few quick examples of not allowing the dog to practice the behavior while you are teaching them to do something else. When it comes to behavioral reasons, so this could be sometimes when dogs are anxious, when their nervous system is dysregulated, they could be bored. So here you see there's a few different whys in there. If they're bored, it's giving them something else to do. And I'm not saying that your dog should be constantly entertained, because that is a whole other problem that we need to address. But this could be an indicator that maybe your dog's not getting enough exercise or enrichment, stimulation in their day-to-day life. They're weak, so they're bored and eating poop. That could be one underlying reason. If they're anxious, again, another reason why we like to go to the vet before starting any behavior modification program, because maybe the dog needs to be on some anxiety medications, calming chews, different things like that. Again, speak to a medical professional about what's going to work best for your dog. And back to the anxiety and stress, if we're looking for lifestyle change in how to mitigate some of those issues, sometimes an increase in exercise, an increase in safari walks, more enrichment, doing brain games, different things like that, that additional stimulation can reduce anxiety and boredom at your dog's baseline stress level. And so therefore, if that is the underlying reason why your dog's eating poop, that should help with the situation. In addition to management, i.e. not letting your dog eat poop. So I know that that was a lot. And if this was a behavior consult where the client was coming into me, I would not be just giving them, here's all the information, but just because I don't know what this listener's particular situation is with their dog, they're not here with me to ask those follow-up questions. I'm giving most of the reasons why this could be occurring and some broad-based suggestions. What's great about that for the rest of you is that if your dog is also struggling with poop eating, I've just given you a bunch of information. So now we're going to roll into our second question of the day. Welcome back, listeners who popped out to skip the poop eating question. I promise no more poop for the rest of the episode. This question is all about how to introduce dogs to puppies. So this was from an individual over on Threads who asked me, what should I do to properly introduce my dog to a puppy? We lost our second dog last May. I'm so sorry for your loss. And our girl is depressed, so we're becoming that stat. I think they're meaning statistic. We are getting a dog for our dog, but I'm not confident in how I should introduce my 6-year-old dog to her new puppy sister. So again, I'm going to talk broadly on this topic, and then I'm going to give you some actionable steps, just so that way everyone listening can get the most they can out of this conversation. When we talk about getting another dog, we want to take a look at what our motivation is. Now, if your dog is really missing having some other canine company and you have space in your heart, your home, in your bank account for an additional dog, go for it. But just make sure that you are also wanting another dog. And this goes for anyone listening. If you're bringing in a second dog into your household, make sure that it's because you want to, not just because you think it's what's best for your other dog. Because if you aren't prepared for it, then the quality of life of your existing pup will suffer. That will affect your relationships. So that is it on that sort of spiel. Next layer to this is, why are you wanting a puppy? There's absolutely nothing wrong with getting a puppy, but I just want listeners to think of, I'm going to bring another dog into my life. What do I want out of that dog? In some cases, a puppy is a great fit, and in some cases, perhaps an adult dog is going to be a better fit. Now let's take a look at the information we have here. The listener has a 6-year-old dog. I'm just going to take another look to see, I don't have any breed info, so I don't know what the 6-year-old pup, what breed they are. I don't know what breed of puppy they're looking into. That will also make a difference. The personality and breed traits of your existing dog versus your future dog, that will largely impact compatibility, but that's a topic for another episode. 6 years old is a good time to get a second dog, a puppy as well. So this is good timing. Sometimes depending on the breed of dog. With senior dogs, it's kind of, I won't even say 50-50 because again, it really depends on the dog. But the older dog, sometimes introducing a puppy into their life is just not good for them. But 6 years old, the dog's not too old yet, and theoretically the training that you've done with this dog has already been well established. This dog at 6 years old is no longer a puppy. They're no longer like just an adult, so their energy level has likely come down a little bit. They've had training, they have a routine. You guys are kind of settled in what life looks together. So you have a pretty good and accurate picture of what your dog is like, and that will help you inform this choice of bringing home a new puppy. How to introduce your adult dog to a puppy will largely depend on actually who your dog is. So for everybody listening, if your dog is the type of dog that loves every dog, they are super social. Every dog they meet is their best friend. And by the way, when we talk about how social a dog is, that really is a spectrum. What I just described is not the majority of dogs. Most dogs are like most humans. Some are super social. They're the life of the party. They're friends with anyone they meet. They can chat up somebody in a grocery store lineup. There are others that not just like prefer to stay in, but also have a small circle of close-knit friends and family. They don't necessarily love meeting tons of new people. They like sticking with their familiar people and situations and places. And some of you might be thinking, like, why are we talking about humans here? But for those who know, some of those dogs fit into those latter category. My eldest is one of them. She is 4 years old, recently turned 4 years old, and she is not super social. She's not necessarily reactive, but she has been always a little bit on the shy side. She's been attacked by a few different dogs. So while she's not going to pick a fight when she encounters another dog, but she's also not necessarily out there looking for dog friends in the way that my younger two would be. They're a lot more likely to want to go say hi to other dogs and be social and maybe play with them versus she's not. She'll maybe like sniff them and then she's back to where the humans are. She's not really interested necessarily in making friends with a lot of dogs. There are exceptions. She does meet some dogs that she really loves, but that is the anomaly rather than the rule. And the reason why I'm using Velma for this metaphor is you are better able than me at this point to assess where your dog is, because how you're going to introduce your adult dog to a puppy will depend on how social your dog is. Are they the type right now that loves puppies? Because there's also a difference that some dogs like other dogs fine, but puppies can get pretty annoying. We see this particularly in older dogs, just because puppies don't know how to behave yet, right? They're babies, they're kiddos. They don't necessarily understand the concept of personal space and, not to chomp on another dog's tail or body slam into them or what have you. So like, how hardy is your 6-year-old dog is another thing to keep in mind. But I think the heart at what this question is asking is how to ensure good relations between your older dog and the puppy. How to make sure that your older dog actually enjoys having the puppy around. While you cannot necessarily like force dogs to be friends with each other any more than you can force kids to be friends with one another, there are things you can do to help facilitate good doggy relations, which is important because they're going to be roommates, right? They need to be able to live together. You need to be able to live with the both of them. So some things to keep in mind, and this is really relevant as well to how you're going to train your puppy and set your whole household up for success. Supervised visits only. I cannot stress this enough, particularly when your puppy is young, when they are untrained, when they're not familiar with your house. That puppy should not be loose unsupervised. And this leads great into how your adult dog is going to interact with the puppy, because if you're not going to leave the puppy unsupervised, that means that your older dog is not left unsupervised with your puppy. This is really great because this means that your puppy has less chances to harass your elder dog, thus annoying your older dog. You know what I mean? So that is one of them. Another thing to keep in mind is it is very easy when there's a new puppy for all of our attention to go into the new pup. This can cause the older dog to be jealous. Yes, dogs can get jealous too. This can also be fueled by you not paying as much attention to your older dog, which is very normal. Puppies are a lot of work. It's kind of like you signed up for another part-time job for the first couple of years of their life. So if your elder dog's walks start to decrease, if the puppy is ripping up all of your older dog's toys, if the puppy is getting all of the cuddles and that older dog isn't getting to snuggle up with you in the bed like they used to, just to give you some examples to work with, that could build resentment. This is not me saying that dogs are sitting here plotting, being like, Mom did this on Saturday. She didn't take me for the morning walk. And then yesterday, the puppy destroyed my toy. Keep in mind that the dog's cognitive ability is much more akin to a toddler or a kindergartner's, but through classical conditioning, dogs start to build associations with things, right? Think about the idea of us going to the dentist, and my dentists are lovely, but I just hate the experience of going. So whenever I think, oh, I have to make an appointment to go to the dentist, I get a little bit, anxious about it just because of my association. Same thing happens with your dog. That's how they start to make associations about things. So it's just they'll start to associate the puppy with negativity, because over time it'll be this pattern of your dog not getting their needs met or the puppy doing something negative to your older dog. So we want to prevent that as much as possible. Another common thing that people get surprised with is resource guarding might pop up. For those that are unfamiliar with resource guarding, lots of things can be a resource. Food and shoes and bones, easy things to see as resources. Toys, a couch, dog beds, you and your attention, you and your personal space can be viewed by your dog as a resource. And perhaps your dog has never before growled at another dog for approaching you, or growled when a dog went to lie on their bed. But with cohabitating with a new dog, we've all had those roommates sometimes where, whatever they do, they just get on your nerves. This could be the case with your elder dog. So the biggest piece of advice I can give you is, before bringing home your puppy, take a look, and like a real honest look. What does your dog's life currently look like? And what are the ways in which that could possibly be impacted by the new puppy? Then you can weigh the pros and cons. You can take a look at, how can I mitigate this, anticipating what the problems are going to be? So that way you can train both your puppy and your old dog and create a system to set everyone up for success. Now, I know that was a lot of information, and I have even more follow-up questions and pieces of advice depending on, what your existing dog is like, what the breed of your dog is, what your older dog who passed away, what were they like? Like, what was their personality like? What breed? How old? What was their dynamic between your dog who passed and your current dog who's 6 years old? A lot of that can also inform the advice I'd give you and the decisions that maybe you should make when it comes to your new puppy. But I wish you guys the best of luck. Again, feel free and DM me if you have follow-up questions, but I'm very excited for you. As somebody who has 3 dogs myself, my husband and I frequently remark to each other that, like, one of our favorite things about our dogs is watching them interact with one another. It's just very special. It's not for everybody. not all people enjoy having more than one dog, and not all dogs enjoy being part of a multi-dog household, but for my guys it works, and it sounds like maybe that is the case for your dog too, given how attached and how sad they are that they're missing their friend. So I'm wishing you guys the absolute best. We're going to move on to our last question. This is on the topic, and this might sound a little mean, but hear me out. Your puppy didn't choose you. Probably. They probably didn't choose you. And this came about from a conversation I was actually having in one of my D&D campaigns. I love dogs so much. They're part of everything that I do. And while I promise the context that produced this question is rather nerdy and part of D&D and TTRPGs, the actual question itself and the advice I'm going to give is not at all nerd related, but I'm just going to give you the flavor so you could see how this came about. This all started when a character I have in one of my campaigns wanted to adopt a animal companion. So my character is a druid. She already has a little pixie dog, and she was offered a snail from one of my fellow players, their character. And how my characters ended up choosing a snail was to sit down on the ground and ask nature, ask the Feywild to show her which snail she should have. And I, as a player above table said, oh, and disclaimer, like, don't pick out your puppy this way. And then a different player asked me, oh, well, like, why not? And we kind of skipped over it because it was going to be a whole thing, a whole little rant, a little TED talk, and didn't want to waste gameplay time. But now you get to hear why we shouldn't do that. The more common instance that you're going to see this is if you're going to a dog shelter, going to a breeder. A lot of people will say, oh, my puppy chose me because they ran up to me right away and loved me so much. And clearly this was the puppy for me. And I swear I'm not trying to be a party pooper when I say this. Like, there's nothing wrong with having that experience and that being how you ended up getting your dog. That's no problem at all. However, I just want to clear up the misunderstanding that meant that your puppy chose you. And now I'm sure we've all seen those really cute clips online where, a lot of these shelter dogs are choosing their humans and it's adorable and we cry. And a lot of people will conflate that to, my puppy chose me. And I'm going to explain to you why those are two different things. So first of all, people think that adopting an adult dog versus, adopting or buying a puppy is the same thing, and they're not. An adult dog is already a fully formed, they're an adult being. They have their own opinions about things. They've had a life. They've had experiences that informs their opinions on things. These are not robots. These are sentient beings. They have favorite things. They have opinions on how things should or should not be done, on what they like, what they don't like. And in this respect, puppies are a bit more of a blank slate. They're not completely a blank slate. That's another misunderstanding, but we will get into that in another video or in another podcast episode. And the reason why I make this distinction with respect to your puppy choosing you is the puppies do not have the life experience, the habits, the associations to have preferences in that way. Now, could a puppy naturally have an instinct to prefer one thing over another? Yes, absolutely. This is where nature versus nurture comes into play. People will say that, oh, it's all in how you raise them. This is not true. There is a genetic component, and there is also a nurture component, a raising component. There's learning and there's genetics, and these things go together. It's why I would highly recommend checking out, I think it's in the back there, Meet Your Breed by, is it Meet Your Breed? Yeah, Meet Your Dog by Kim Brophy. Excellent read, and she will explain it much more eloquently than I ever could in that book. But it's not fair to ignore nature when it comes to who the dog is as an individual and how this plays out when it comes to you choosing a dog or a dog choosing you is that some puppies are just more social. than others. This might seem like a dumb moment, but really think about the implications of this here. You imagine this. You walk into a pen. There's 5 puppies in this pen, and 2 of them race over to you. You might think, one of these puppies, is the one for me. And that could be the case. Maybe you want a really social dog, a really social puppy, really loves people. And again, keep in mind here when I say these things, these are broad generalizations. Obviously, each individual dog is different, but I'm just illustrating the underlying points and personalities here. And why I say this is you're going to leave, think about what puppy you want. I walk in, I sit down. Those same 2 puppies would likely run up to me as well, and the next person, and so on and so forth, because they are just more social dogs. Now, does that mean that you shouldn't choose those puppies? No, not necessarily. That dog might be perfect for you, but I just don't want people to make the mistake of thinking that that dog chose you specifically because they ran up to you, especially when it comes to puppies. On the other hand, there might be a dog in the corner that doesn't come up to you. They're perfectly content. They're sleeping. They're tired. There might be another puppy that, isn't sure about you and is kind of off in the corner, maybe interacting with their siblings, maybe looking towards their caretaker or their mom, being like, what the heck? Why is this person here? See, so on the flip side here, you don't need to be personally affronted. That puppy doesn't hate you. It just means you're a stranger and they're maybe a little bit unsure of strangers. Why I say this is these are also baselines. Does that mean that those first 2 puppies are going to love people forever and that other puppy is going to be super wary of everybody? No, not necessarily. But this is where the nature part comes in. And so if you choose a particular dog, one of these puppies, I'm going to paint you a picture of how this could potentially go. Say you have the nervous puppy in the corner. One of the things that I would recommend if I was your trainer and we were working together is that we're going to work on building that puppy's confidence. We're going to really focus on socialization, which we should always do. Socialization, by the way, means neutrality. It means being not super hyped about something, but not super scared. And that's something that people get wrong a lot of the times when they're socializing puppies. But for that more nervous puppy, it's creating positive associations. Does that mean that that puppy is going to be the life of the party when they're adult? Maybe yes, maybe no. I mean, there's a lot we can do with raising, but we don't fundamentally change who that dog is. In the same way, we don't fundamentally change who children are, right? They both impact nature versus nurture. On the flip side of this, a lot of times people will go and they'll pick that puppy that's super excited to see you. Maybe they even pee. They're so excited when they see you. They're jumping up over you. They're super excited, licking you so much. And then they're surprised when that dog is an adolescent and is constantly pulling towards other dogs, other people, jumping up on people, maybe still excitedly peeing, etc. So again, it's 2 ends of the same spectrum. And all puppies need training. I'm not saying that you should or should not choose either of those puppies. I'm just saying know what puppy you're working with and make your training plan accordingly. And if you don't know what you're working with, maybe consider reaching out to a professional just so you can actually understand your dog, because that understanding is necessary for you both to enjoy your life together. You need to be able to communicate. You need to know how you can best raise and take care of your dog. And part of that comes from knowing who they are. Whew, we covered a lot. I feel like this was like 3 separate TED Talks all in one, and I actually could probably go for another hour on each of those topics, but I don't want to talk your ear off. So feel free in the comments. Let me know if you have follow-up questions. Maybe I'll make a part 2. But if you enjoyed this episode today and want to hear more of them, feel free to hit that subscribe button. If you yourself have dog questions, feel free and submit them via the link in the show notes, and maybe you might have the opportunity to get your question answered on the pod. Go ahead and follow me on Instagram at the Canine Detective to get updates on both my show and services if you want to learn more about dog training. Please give your dog some scritches for me. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time on Dear Dog Fanatic.